Thanks very much. Hey, everyone. Great to see all of you in the way that we connect these days in the Zoom room, right? This is an official meeting now. We officially have met. It counts in Zoom. So it used to be only if you were in physical space and actually looked each other in the eye and shook hands or something that would count. But now it all counts. So great to meet all of you. Thank you so much for coming to this session. Appreciate it. We have a couple of hours, and I think there's a break in the middle at some point. I'm not sure if that's a flexible break or if that's a hard break at some point, but we'll take about 10 minutes or so in the middle here. But we have a couple of hours to go a little bit more deeply into some of the themes that we brought up in the keynote this morning, and also to try to give you some sense of what a process looks like for thinking about moving forward in your own schools. So hopefully this is, you'll have some takeaways from this in terms of your thinking. And if nothing else, at least a little bit more concrete understanding of what those 3 R's mean and how you can use them both for your individual kind of capacity building, but also for the institutional capacity building that, as we all know, is a big part of this. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we will start really by just by just giving a few minutes to have you just grab the mic and to practice just getting involved and participating. And to do that, just to think a little bit or to react a little bit to this idea of normal in schools that I played with in the keynote, just to freshen your memory as we went through this list of ways in which I think we think about school being normal. We're just wondering if you wouldn't mind just grabbing the mic or in the chat to just react to that a little bit. What did you think about that? What here kind of resonates maybe more than other things? Is there anything you want to push back against and say, no, that's not really normal, the way that you've articulated it there? Or anything else, just when you think about going back to normal, what that path looks like, or what that thinking looks like. So we're going to assume a little bit of silence here, because usually it's takes a little time for someone to be brave to just jump in there, but we'll see. Maybe maybe there's a lot of brave people in the audience, but what do you think? What did you think of that piece of the keynote this morning, and what do you think moving forward? I see Michael's already unmuted, so go ahead, Michael. I knew I could count on you.
I guess you're used to me jumping in, unfortunately. Just tell me to shut up when you need to.
No, not at all, not at all.
I actually took a screenshot of this morning because I think, as I mentioned to you guys last week on in the other group we have about the Big Questions Institute, I actually think a lot about this as a granddad, thinking, how do I make sure my grandkids don't experience the same, sorry, but, I was just use the word crap, same stuff that we've seen for so many years. And, I think that many of our schools can say we don't do a lot of these things, but a lot of times they come up no matter what you do. So I screenshot it, and it's there for me to think, what do we do?
Great. Well, it's meant as a provocation, so that's a great provocation to have. Anyone else want to just chime in?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Joseph, go for
it. I've really been struggling with the self-worth as measured by numbers, because I just don't believe in it, and it did actually end up occurring to me today that for some people that is actually good and appropriate, but it's not for probably the majority. And when you think about the kids that really stand out in school, or when I think about them, they're really not just the ones, or sometimes not even the ones that are measured by numbers. They're the artists, they're the dancers, they're the student leaders, and their numbers might be a lot lower than other people's numbers. But what it really highlights is everybody has that worth, right? And it needs to be able to be shown in different ways. And to me, that's what all of this is about, really, and it kind of, to me, Michael, I'm not there with you yet. My kids have not yet had kids, but they're getting close. And yeah, this world really can't be the same for my grandkids.
Thanks, Joseph. You know, I remember my days as a teacher fondly. And I can't tell you how many times kids came to me and said, what do I need to do to get a B? What do I need to do? I need 2 points. Can I just get the 2 points? Is there extra credit? Is there something? It was rare that someone came in and said, how can I learn more about this? You know, and yeah, I agree with you. I think a lot of pressure on kids. And I think there's a lot of angst when kids don't perform by our numbers to the point where they think they're supposed to. And certainly there are lots of implications around that. Who else? Someone else just want to grab the mic and chime in, or? Go ahead.
Go, Gabby. Go, Gabby.
Go ahead.
Adding on a little bit, I also think that as teachers, sometimes we fall into like this perfect student, and we como que assume that a certain profile is going to be the one that's interesting, and then
Right.
once we start connecting with them and we get to know their stories, like that under the surface of what they do outside of school, and but maybe academically they're not super strong, but they tend to be like the coaching at football, like the coach. Como que suddenly you start to see a lot of strengths and skills that sometimes we don't get to honor inside like the building.
Yeah. There was actually a great book by Jal Mehta and Sarah Fine, and the title is In Search of Deeper Learning. And what they found is in schools, most deep learning, as they defined it, happens on the athletic fields, in the music room, on the theater stage, where kids are opting in and saying, I want to do that instead of I have to do that, you know, and it's a pretty interesting distinction. Someone else had jumped in there. Lar, do you want to go ahead?
Oh, well, yeah, thank you. I was thinking while reading through your list that it was like so sad and overwhelming, but the worst part is that we're used to it. And somehow we have been doing that for years and we feel okay because that's a standard way of doing things. So I think that it will be like crazy or even insane to think on going back to that. If we go through the pandemic and then go back to this, then I think that we didn't learn anything at all.
Thanks for that.
I'd like to, something that resonated with me, an increasing illiteracy to recognize misinformation. As during the last year, we have moved more and more to being online. And I found that students, just through tiredness or that they do not want to investigate to see if the information they're using is, real or,
Yeah.
It's just, I felt a thorough tiredness in people. And so that's something that bothers me.
Well, there's no question it's become a lot more complex, hasn't it? It used to be you read something in the news or in a magazine or in a book, and there had been an editor in the process somewhere that had kind of checked that out. But now we all have to be editors. Everything comes to us unfiltered now, pretty much everything. And that's one aspect, again, as a journalism major and as a practicing journalist for a few years, a long, long time ago now, but it's something that really is interesting and scary to me, in that we don't seem to be able to interrogate facts or interrogate information very, very, very well at all. So thanks for that, Andrea. Appreciate it. How about one more reaction of any type? Anyone have anything they want to add to the list? Maybe something that I forgot or kind of glossed over, or
perhaps.
Go ahead, Jessica. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm reading Silos of Knowledge that sorry. An emphasis on teaching, not learning. I think that's applied to us too, because with the pandemic and we suddenly having to change everything. We just start noticing that we as teachers don't know many things. Sorry, I'm a little nervous.
No, don't be nervous. No, go ahead.
I've noticed that some teachers just go to some conferences, but then they don't apply anything that is taught there. But now we are obligated to do that, to apply everything that we have seen before, to learn how to use new platforms, programs. And I think that needs to change. Even if we go back to normal classes, I think that we as teachers must be open to continue learning and try to apply some new knowledge.
That's a great comment, and it's absolutely something that we're going to have to be very flexible, and we're going to have to be learners right now. We talk about this a lot, that teachers have to, in fact, I actually wrote a book that said from master teachers to master learners, right? Because if we adults aren't learners in the classroom right now, that's not good for our kids. That means that we're depending on things that we've known for a long time, or that have happened, that we've learned in the past. And the whole contexts, all the contexts are changing, the practices are changing, the literacies, all of that. So we have to continue to learn. And I think it's really interesting too, and then I'm going to hand it over to Homa, but I think it's really interesting when we go in and we talk to schools and we work with schools and ask them, can we see your professional development list? Like, what type of PD are you giving? Almost all of it is about teaching. How do we teach better? How do we deliver the curriculum in a different way? Or how do we use technology or whatever? Very little of it is about building the capacity of teachers as learners. Like, how do we think about our own learning? How can we learn more deeply in this moment? And I think that's a really important shift that we have to make these days, because again, it's all about learning right now. It's all about being able to learn your way through challenges, through problems, all of that. Listen, thanks so much. That was great. Thanks to all of you.
Mr. Will, I would like to add another one to the list.
Go for it, Martha. You go.
And I will say that for me, normal in school is like the hugs and the I miss you, Miss Martha, every Monday after the weekend, because that connection with our kids, that social and emotional part with the kids. So I will add to the list that social and emotional part that we miss right now.
Yep. And so we're going to do a little exercise a little bit later in this session where I'm going to guarantee you that's going to come up again.
I really miss those hugs on Monday, that then I realized, oh, okay, I miss you. So I really miss those hugs, or I miss Martha, I miss you during the weekend. So I will add to the list.
Yep, that's really important. Thanks for bringing that up. All right, Homa.
Okay, hey, thank you. Muy buenas tardes a todos ustedes. Qué placer estar con ustedes hoy día. I'm Homa Tavangar. I work with Will as co-founders and co-authors at the Big Question Institute, and really, really happy to be with you. And I'm really delighted to see such great comments, things like, I don't know if you saw this, Will, but just say no to normal. That's a good one. That could be our bumper sticker.
Can we steal that somewhere?
Yeah, somebody said just say no to normal, but also just this thoughtful reflection, and we really appreciate it, and really appreciate sometimes for some, the courage to speak up is also important, and we welcome that. So thank you. So all these ideas have kind of led us to create a framework for the Big Questions Institute and around this exact conversation that we are having. So drum roll, this is our first time sharing it in a workshop. We are very excited to share this framework for kind of the way we're thinking, and it's a lot. It's 4 overlapping circles and a lot of words, and I'm going to just walk you through this, and hopefully it's going to help us to get to some of the interaction that we are going to be doing in just a few minutes. So to start, we frame this work in the 3 actors: individuals, our institutions like our schools, and our community. All three are really vital. And I thought it was important listening as we were beginning what's, normal in schools and what are we thinking about? Like when Michael talks about, I'm thinking about my grandchildren, and many of us will be thinking about our children. It's personal, right? What we're talking about, we cannot separate our personal, like what's in our heart, or even Martha explaining, like saying, I miss the hugs. It's personal. So the individual, the way the individual relates to a system and a structure and a community is vital. The way that we create social change, it starts with individuals. It starts with what is in our heart, our thoughts. So we don't want to ignore that. And I think often these frameworks, system structure kind of loses what is special about the individual. So that's really important, as is institution, and then coming together as a community, learning together. And we're going to talk more about all of these. And then we're leading with these questions, and Will touched on these in his keynote. We must ask as an individual first, and we're going to do some reflection. Who are we now? Or who have we been? Where have we come from? Who am I now? And what might we become? What is possible? And I think Will also, Will talked about, we have hope. We are optimistic. And hope is a discipline. It takes some work. But I really, we were talking about this framework yesterday, and an idea that what drives me in this work is the belief in human potential. We have the answers within us and with us and between us. And so what might we become? We can really sort of dream and imagine and think forward and use our imaginations to think into the future. And then when we focus on, we're going to spend some time on the individual side. And so for the individual to think about who are we now, we need to examine our purpose. And to do that, it's going to take some real sort of radical candor, honesty, truth-telling. We have to be truthful about where we have been and what is going on, like that, looking at the uncomfortable normal that we have. Sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. And then look at our practices. And then as we go forward in thinking what might we become, go beyond examining our personal purpose to also redefining our roles and thinking about what might those, not just the new jobs of the future, but like all the hats that I might wear going into the future, and what might I create? So there's that imagination for thinking forward. And then as institutions, we need to be interrogating our relevance. So looking at those normals, and that's what maybe a strategic plan does, but it really has to be honest about interrogating relevance. And then we do think there is this challenge of reinventing schools, that what we built in an industrial age, a factory model, one size fits all, we know it doesn't work anymore. And I think all of this, live curious and go beyond, and all of these hopes and ideas that we have are getting us toward a vision and a goal of reinventing school. And then sort of around this model are the dispositions. And at Big Questions Institute, a big kind of motto of ours since the pandemic has been, we've been working especially with leaders and building leaders. You're all leaders in some way, and emerging leaders, to practice fearless inquiry, because we recognize this is hard. It is scary. We're tired, right? And so the disposition of fearless inquiry is actually energizing. And a lot of this work can be very energizing. And then what might we become? It takes us into a process of continuous learning. And then when we look at the side pillars, individual, institution, it's a process of personal growth and then as an individual that we'll be leaning into and practicing and thinking about, and then institutionally, structurally, cultural change. And so we're going to be doing some activities and exercises to help us kind of unstick our minds and think in this sort of really big way moving forward. And using this framework, it's just a guide. And we really are sort of in a very iterative process. So we're test driving it with you now to see how well does it hold up. So, but we're excited about sharing this and about thinking about the future. The future can be scary, and we want to sort of lean in with this fearless inquiry to think about what might we become. And
I'm just gonna, if I could jump in just really fast.
Please.
I mean, what's really important to us too is this emphasis on our own personal capacity building. That you know, we can talk about how we want to change schools and how we want to, you know, make schools different and whatever else, but those conversations really don't stick, and they're really irrelevant unless we've done the work first, unless we've really looked at who we are, looked at our practice, looked at our beliefs, looked at our values, and really come to reframe our moment here, you know, how we act in this moment and what we believe in this moment, and then bring those conversations to a larger dialogue around, okay, so what do we do now in schools? How can we move forward? It's very difficult if we haven't done the work to have conversations around that, because, you know, you're talking to maybe a lot of people who are living in 2010, you know, or 2015, or maybe even 2019, which seems so long ago now, but it was a very different time from what it is right now.
And Michael, you're asking, where does a question about challenging traditions fall? So one of the things, this framework is sort of built up on top of the 9 questions. So the 9 big questions, we want to make sure everyone had a chance to download our free ebook, and Will talked about the ebook in his keynote. So I think challenging traditions, it gets us, you know, maybe I put the question back on you. Where does challenging traditions fall? Where would you interrogate the traditions that maybe you've grown out of? Maybe they don't, that maybe you've grown out of. So using the 9 questions can be a tool to interrogate all the systems and structures, the specifics that you want to talk about.
Some great comments in the chat, and appreciate that. I don't know if anyone wants to, well, you know, if there's a, in the bottom of the participants window, there is a raised hand function. If you want to jump in, you want to make a comment, we want to make sure that you have time to do that. So don't hesitate to use that and let us know that you want to get into the conversation. So, Graciela, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, we're definitely going to talk about narratives a little bit later. And when we think actually that story is a major ingredient to change and to thinking about what comes next in schools. And we're going to spend a little time on that as well. So sit tight and we'll get to that definitely.
And a really good question about from Gabriela, I would like to know more about how to effectively identify and create purpose and relevance. And I think this, again, this framework will get you, like the fact that now you ask that question. So then you can go, like, say, to the 9 questions and think about things like, why do we do this? With a lens of what is the purpose? Or thinking about power structures. Maybe it has to do with who got to make that choice and when, who is unheard. And so building that that relevance and that purpose. And I mean, we could have a whole long session about purpose. That's one of my favorite topics. But it is embedded in all of this. So even just to be asking it and making visible some of these interrogations that you have that are really fundamental is very powerful. And you know what, Will, I will put in, I'll put in a link to the book one more time, and I'll put it in as many times as people need, because we really want you to share it and read it. So if there are any, oh, good. Thank you, Mariana. Okay, so that's the link. You just, you put in your email and then you'll get the link to your email. Okay, so now this frame is in a bigger context. And when we talk about the work that we're doing, it is always, we really try to make sense of what is going on around us. None of us are working in a vacuum. Context is vital. So, you know, clearly, this is a really strange time. I saw, if you have a connection to Texas, which I know a lot of people that I know here do, somebody just sent a meme that said 2020 was a year of hell and 2021 was the year that hell froze over. So, you know, this has been an extremely strange time. Climate, economy, coronavirus, global pandemic, racial reckoning, justice questions, not only in the United States, everywhere. I'm really fascinated, excuse me, by the movement also for gender equality in Latin America. The protests by women in Mexico City and Santiago, all over the world, finding our voices is powerful. All of this impacts what our students are doing. And we might think of that, this is the curriculum, right? This is the we want to ask, and I always talk about this, we want to move from asking our students, what do you want to be when you grow up, to what problem do you want to solve? We have to look at all of this that's going on so we can help our students. So it brings us to our 3 R's, and this is the real focus of what we're going to do: reflect, reset, and reinvent. So we'll get started with that.
So first of all, we need to just step back and take a deep breath, right? I mean, like I said in the keynote, and like we are all feeling this moment, if we can take a step back from it, is quite amazing. And it is a moment for history. We will be thinking about this time, writing about this time, talking about this time period for ages to come. And what we do in this moment is, I think, is a very urgent question. The only way that we can begin the process of moving forward is to try to get some sense of what's happened. And it's very difficult to do that when we're in the middle of it. And I know that there are many people who are just too exhausted. It's too raw and intense right now to do it. But I will tell you, we've had the good fortune of working with groups of people who have been willing to set aside the moment and try to make sense of it. And they have been energized by the process. They feel like it's important work, that it's crucial to understanding what to do next. And so reflection is the first piece of this. I'm going to just bring up this quote again by Adrienne Maree Brown that I used in the keynote, but it's powerful. So much of this is simply an uncovering. And again, you look at that list of normal, what's normal in schools. It's not new. And it's not that it's necessarily getting worse, but what's happening now is that we look at that and now our brains go, we just simply cannot do that any longer because of what's been uncovered about the world, because of what we've learned about where we're at in this moment of history. And it's really scary, which means we have to hold each other tight and keep pulling back that veil, keep pulling back the layers on these practices, on these belief systems, on these, on the ways in which we operate in schools, the ways in which we think about what an education is. I mean, the entire idea of education is changing in this moment right now. It will never be the same because not only of what the pandemic has done, but because again, we're starting to uncover that there are many, many things that our kids are going to need in order to thrive in their lives that we're not offering them right now in their educational system. So we want to look at this who we are now piece. That's the reflection question. Who are we now? Who have we become? How are we different from where we were even 12 months ago, but certainly a couple of years ago, 5 years ago? How has our purpose changed? How has our own understanding of ourselves? How have we personally changed as people, as human beings? What is more important to us now than maybe it was in the past? All of those things, in terms of our values and everything else. So we're just going to dive in to a breakout session where we want you guys to go and talk for a little bit, and then we'll bring you back and we'll have a little bit of a kind of a meta discussion about what you reflected on. So here it is. What is a truth that we've learned that has been uncovered, that has been there all along? And you can really personalize this by saying, I learned that. And if you think about the last 12 months, again, couple of years, whatever, what have you learned about yourself, about your institution, about the world, about whatever else, right? What have you learned in this moment that you feel is really important and might have a profound impact on how you think about what comes in the future? So what have you learned? That's what we want you to reflect on. And I'm going to put you, let me see, we have 31 people. So I'm going to put you into, let's go into 6 different rooms here. We'll give you about 5 or 6 minutes. I'm just going to do this randomly, and have a great chat. And we'll see you back here at let's say 3:10 or
just think about even just what is your reflex? What is your reflex response? I have learned that. What first comes to mind? Doesn't have to be too difficult.
Right. So look inside and see what comes out. Here we go. Have fun.
Good conversation. Hi, welcome back. Hey, so we want to welcome. We want to spend just a few minutes reviewing, just kind of reflecting on reflection. How was that? And if you want to put in the chat, I learned that. What was it that you learned? And it's kind of cool to see what all the different responses of things that you've learned over this period of time, this last year or today, whatever. And if anyone would like to speak to that, please go ahead and unmute. Oh, I learned less is more. That is powerful. Oh, these are good.
If anyone wants to just grab the mic and talk a little bit about either your conversation or what you were thinking yourself, feel free to do that. We're all family here, right? By now, we've been here half an hour together, so we're all, we're all good friends now.
I'll start it off. I really liked our group. And, we had the less is more was the first one that just really resonated with everybody, but also just about how important connections are, and the importance of family, but the importance of really having those connections with students before you can do anything. And then the other thing that we talked about, not as positive, is about the resistance to change and how strong that is, and how that just seems to be more powerful sometimes than excitement about possibilities. So we had a good conversation though. Thank you for the opportunity. It was great.
Gabriella, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, well, after sharing our thoughts, I ended up with, this has been a problem-based learning imposed on us, and we've made it through, and here we are.
Definitely.
Yeah, just applying it and solving whatever comes.
Yeah.
I think that's one of those cases where the statement probably is, I learned, period. Right? I just learned a whole bunch of stuff. Anyone else?
And I learned that I can. So this is great, and it kind of leads us, something that also came out in Will's keynote as he presented our questions, and we're going to have some deep dive shortly on the 9 questions, but we saw that this sort of naturally leads us to, like, we are inquiry seeking beings. I think we are questioners, we are curious. That's part of what we are as humans. And so naturally, a question that kind of comes out of this that we could have a little more discussion or also maybe think about in the chat is what's on the next slide, is what questions would you ask to reflect deeply on your institution and your school community? So what are some questions, now that you're thinking about what you learned, what questions have come up for you? And were there some questions that came out from your group? It would be wonderful actually to put them in the chat. And also, of course, if you want to talk about it, you can, but we can leave a few seconds for quiet. We are deep in this reflect of our 3 R's. So reflect on what questions have come out for you, questions to your school community. It could be also to the world. And I am going to be quiet here to give you some time to think about that. I will mention, I'll break the silence a little bit. From Catherine's comment, almost every session that I have been in over the last few weeks, a version of courage has been a theme that has come up. And there is something about right now where there is a lot of need for courage. If we are to make any change on any front, we need to have courage and grit. Yes. Thanks, Laura. Definitely. Any other questions that are coming out for people that you're wondering? Something that you wonder?
Homa, I wonder how long it really does take to impact, that cultural community change? Because, you know, in my case, you know, I've been head of school for now 20 years and 4 different schools, not the same school, but, you know, here at our school for 8 years. And we've made great strides, but it still sometimes seems like baby steps. And so you think, you know, how long does it take to really make that? And I'm not sure.
And that's where I think the fearless inquiry comes in, because nobody knows. I mean, there's a lot of study around change. Like, we could dive deep into that as well. So it's not that it hasn't been studied, but really implementing it in each environment, we don't know yet. I do think, though, when the commitment is made, a lot can be done in a pretty short time. That is surprising. But it's really hard because it involves a lot of shared vision and unity around that.
And I think the willing, you know, you mentioned courage, and we all need to be willing to make mistakes, but then everyone needs to be willing to make mistakes. And then everyone else needs to know that you don't then get to blame the person for the mistakes, you know, because I think that's what often happens. And then you're like second guessing, you know, what could I have done? What should I have done? And I think that then just wastes a bunch of time, you know?
Yeah.
And I think, I think that there must be a change that goes beyond everything. Is this unity, this united front that you're saying? I think it's partly the schools, the societies, communities, the laws, because even though we can think of education in a way of learning and how to measure that learning, usually we end up measuring students' success, if we can say that word to address to that issue, with a number.
Yeah.
So I think that I am the kind of teacher who wants to see the students grow, learn, curious, investigate, research, do their things hands-on, you know, and learn from that, and that learning becomes part of their personality, like an overall growth. But then at the end of the GP, I need to turn in a number. And I don't even believe in that number. So for me, it's a double discourse, because it's like saying, I want them to learn in a certain way, but then they need to show me, and I need to deliver just a number. And the ultimate thing is that is going to continue. And as far as, in my opinion, I think that has to change, but that takes bigger changes in other spheres around the education. What I do is I try to help my students. I mean, I don't believe in those numbers. Right. When we are reading a novel, I teach literature. And if we read Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, okay, I'm not going to just read the novel and the plot and analyze the plot elements. No, let's take it a step forward, more, think about the repercussions, open your eyes to reality. Things have to change, and we are that for the change. So basically, but then at the end, they ask me for a number, and I feel that I am betraying even myself. Yeah. But I don't know, how can that be possible? That is my question. If in the near future, the very near future, because I would like that to be changed now, this could change. Is there any other way of measuring this? I don't know.
There are, and Mariana, just, you're not alone in that. You know, I think there are a lot of teachers who are frustrated, and I think don't want to do that and feel like they're doing a disservice to kids when they have to do that. So I think that's a great question and a great exploration to pursue. How else could we begin to do that? And there are lots of ways that people are doing that. I want to just briefly, you know, in terms of thinking about reflecting as an institution, I just want to point out, if I can find it here really fast, because the chat's flying by here, but Katie had a great, I think, question in the chat. You know, what systems within the school allowed us to quickly pivot to this completely new context, and what systems were obstacles to the pivot? That is such an exceptional question, for us to reflect on, because it is, we learned a lot about what it takes to change in the last year, didn't we? We learned that we could change in many ways. We learned what many of the obstacles were. And if we can look back on that and really think about that, we can learn a lot for what we might, how we might think about change in the future. And so those types of questions are powerful when it comes to looking at the institution and how the institution learned, how the systems changed, and maybe not the practices so much, but certainly how the thinking around the practices may have changed. So that reflection piece, and we're just going to push forward here a little bit because we only have a couple of hours, but that reflection piece, both as individuals and institutions, is really important. And the more that you can bring people together, students, parents, teachers, leaders, community members, and just sit and say, what did we learn? What happened to us? How are we different now? That's a really important part of the process as we move forward. I'm just going to jump into this, and we'll take a little bit of a break here at the bottom of the hour, because I know we need to get a couple minutes in just to do a stretch. Want to talk about reset. And so if once we've reflected on what's happened and once we've kind of thought about what we've learned, then there's this opportunity for us to say, okay, so what still works and what doesn't work? And what do we want to try to figure out in terms of what we keep and what we leave behind? And so we really are interrogating our relevance. We're examining our purpose again. And now's when we're looking at practice, and we're also looking at story, our narratives. What is the story of our school? What are the stories that we tell? And this will be the only part of this presentation where we're going to just go through pretty quickly some ideas and kind of do a little bit of a slide run here. But you have to understand right now that we are in between stories in schools. We're in between stories in a lot of things, right? We're in between stories in terms of politics and business and media. Certainly media, people in media don't really know what the story is right now, you know, because it's just changed so much. But education is no different. We're in this messy middle period where we're moving from something very traditional to something that we're not sure what it looks like yet, but we know it's going to be different because it has to be different. And it may take a long time and whatever else, but the arc is change. It is shifting toward a more learner-centered, more real-world application type of experience in schools. And so we would love to know, as we kind of go through these slides, if in the chat, if you would just talk about, just really briefly, what are the kinds of words or sentences that make up the story of your school? What is the pitch, if you know what I mean? When you're going out and you're trying to get parents, if you're like an independent or international school, or you're a public school and you want to make sure that the real estate agents in your neighborhood are singing your praises in the way you want them to be sung, what are the kinds of sentences or words that you are giving to them that you want to be your story about what happens in your school? So hopefully we'll get a few of those coming in the chat. Excellence for life. Yeah. And so keep going. Add some more of those. What is it that you're trying to say is your story? And as you do that, I'm going to kind of just step us through this kind of shifting narrative that's happening right now. Look, there's no question. Let's not even talk about K through 12 education right now. Let's just take a look at higher education, right? Higher education is absolutely going through change. The pandemic has challenged the whole concept of place-based, paid-for learning at a college or university in ways that many colleges and universities are struggling with right now. And not only is it the cost, but it's the credential. A lot of people are starting to wonder if the college credential is the best credential or the only credential. And certainly there's an argument to be made that now there are lots of ways that we can get credentials for the things that we can do, for the things that we learn. And so it begs the question, do we want to continue to tell kids that the only narrative, the only story that they have to live to get to success, quote unquote, is to go to college, is to spend a lot of money to go to university? Not saying that that's not a bad option, but I'm saying it's not the only option any longer, and it's one that's changing. The traditional story of education basically says you go to school, you play by the rules, you work hard, you get good grades, you ace the test, you go to good college, and you get a good job. And education is something that it's explicit, it's clearly defined, it's something that is competitive. And if you don't have that type of education, you can't get ahead. But that story is changing. That story is not the way that education and schooling is kind of moving right now. The shifting story says you can create your own school. You can find your own teachers. You can develop your own curriculum, find your passion, learn how to learn, develop skills, find and solve real problems. Education is tacit, right? It's not explicit. It's in the interactions with other people and within the interactions in the world. It's about impact. It's about collaboration, and it's about something that you desire. Now, we can see the beginnings of this shift happening. And one of the countries that's most on our radar right now that we talk about a lot is Taiwan. Taiwan has decided that they are going to move away. What you just talked about in terms of grades and numbers, they're getting rid of that. They're saying competition is not the way to do school. Instead, it's about competencies. It's about global citizenry. It's about intrinsic rather than extrinsic motivation, you know, the grades and the credits and all that kind of stuff. That students and parents can design their own curriculum. They have choice and agency and freedom. That the teacher is a co-learner in the process. The teacher isn't just the expert kind of just giving out the information, that it's about well-being. What a concept, right? Especially now, but it's about well-being of kids, and it's about innovation. And that really the emphasis of school is to focus on sustainability, inclusion, and innovation. Those are the three big things. And those are not, again, those are not explicit. Those are much more kind of general ideas of how to operate in the world, that we need to have sustainable practices right now. We need to include more people into the conversations, and we're going to have to innovate our way out of many of the problems that we have right now. But that's what lifelong learners need to focus on, not getting good grades, not getting great credentials in the traditional sense. So, basically everything you do in your school tells a story. Every single thing you do in your school tells a story. The way you configure your classrooms, that tells a story. It's an interesting, and it's in our book too, it's an interesting exercise if you think about what would a stranger think the story of your school is simply by walking around your school for an hour or so. Just kind of looking in classrooms and listening to the conversations and seeing what kids and teachers are doing. I'll tell you a quick story about my own kids. A few years ago, at the beginning of the school year, we got an email from the principal, and the principal's message at the very beginning wasn't, "Hey, welcome back. We missed you. We can't wait to see you. We have great things we're going to do this year. We're innovating." It was none of that. Instead, the first thing she said was, "We're looking forward to starting the school year off right, so make sure you review the dress code policy." And that tells a story, right? That tells a story about what's important at my kid's school. And also the signs in the hallways: no food, no drinks, no cell phones, no this, walk on the right side, all of that kind of stuff. That's a story. In the States, where schools spend literally like millions of dollars on big football scoreboards, that tells a story. And so everything that you do, everything you purchase, every person you hire, every budget that you create, every choice you make tells a story about what's important in your school and what's not important. And I'll end with this tweet that was from a teacher during the early moments of the pandemic last July, not so early, but in the middle of the pandemic, who basically said that story in that school was to sit kids down in Zoom sessions and basically have them in front of a computer for 8 hours, 15 minutes of teaching, lessons are synchronized, trying to replicate normal. And that tells a story as well, without a question.
So another angle on the story is who is in the story, who belongs in the story. And there is a really powerful metaphor from the scholar Beverly Daniel Tatum, who talks about this idea, and you can think about this in relation to the curriculum, how do your students all see themselves in the story? Whose voices are centered? What are some of the other, who gets to make decisions? It kind of goes to the questions that we have around where is the power, who is unheard. So Beverly Daniel Tatum talks about the idea, imagine you're taking a selfie and you're in a group, and what's the first thing you do after you take the picture? Don't you get that phone and you all want to see how you turned out? Where am I in the picture? Let me see myself in the picture. What if every time you do that, your face is gone from that picture? You're smudged out. You disappear from that story. You're not in that picture. After a while, you're not going to work so hard to see yourself in that story, in that picture. You're going to think maybe something's wrong with me. Why bother? What is the point? And this is what starts to happen with students who really maybe don't feel that they belong, don't see themselves as part of the story. And I thought it was, and then there's an African proverb that we like to cite, this idea that the lion's story will never be known as long as the hunter is the one to tell it. And so the story we usually hear is the story of the winner, the victor, the hunter. And we miss that incredible story of the lion in this case. And I think it was really interesting when you, so many of you shared, what's the pitch, what's the marketing story from your schools? And they were so, they were really positive, and I think it says a lot about your schools. So we don't want to presume anything, but you were talking about inclusion and global citizenship, which is a topic very dear to my heart. But you were talking about all these wonderful things. And I wonder if that is really how everybody hears the story. So I did not hear about how many national merit semifinalists or average SAT score, or is the story of your school really about your college admissions, who's getting into college admissions, or much more grade and score driven, because the reality is that is often the story of the school. And so we lose a lot in telling that story, and it can be very powerful. And this is also part of a truth telling. What is the message we're really giving? Whose story are we really telling? Who sees themselves in the story of our school? So it is, and there are new stories that are being told. So that is very true as well. So going back to this article that Will cited earlier from Arundhati Roy, if you recall, the idea that the pandemic is a portal, and that historically pandemics have forced us to break with the past and imagine our world anew. And so this pandemic is not different from past ones. Let's use this. Let's see this. And we're going to go into a little exercise here. So take this personally. Imagine the pandemic is your portal and you have a choice. Do you walk through that portal, that gateway? And she uses this dramatic words, the dramatic terminology, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our databanks, dead ideas, dead rivers, and smoky skies. So what are you dragging with you? Or you can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. So we want you to think about your story. We want you to think about the portal. And one of our big questions is, what is sacred? And we want you to think about, and as an individual, what is sacred to you? We heard some answers previously, right? Like what Martha said at the beginning. What is sacred to you individually? And what is sacred about your school institutionally? So this is the time to think of your reset. You have a chance to repack your luggage. What are you going to carry with you forward through the portal. And what you carry with you is what matters the most. And that's what you want to take into the post-pandemic world. And to even build your voice to say what that is. So we have this Padlet, bit.ly/LC Sacred for Live Curious Sacred. And yeah, Mariana, thanks for posting the full link. So if you just click on that link, you can go into the Padlet, and probably a lot of you have experience using these like a sticky note, and share with us what is sacred to you. So you're already doing that. Great.
And
what do you want to hear?
Why don't we just take until 15 minutes to 10 more minutes from now, just to take a little break as well.
Great.
And then when we come back, we'll take a look and have a conversation around what's on the Padlet. Does that work? Okay. Sorry, Homa. I just wanted to.
No, that's okay. So at what time is that?
At like 3:40 at 2:45 Mexico City time, or Mexico time, Central time.
So that's
in about 10 minutes from now. 10 minutes from now, we'll come back.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Take a break, everyone.
Break and write in the Padlet.
Yep.
Okay. So you can see that's a good idea to share the screen. Welcome back from the break, everybody. So this is a wonderful board. It is great to read your Padlet board that you filled in. And some people found the thumbs up and thumbs down. I don't think we have any thumbs down. It's a very supportive group. And we just want to take a little bit of time, read over what you see. Any reflections? Any reflections on your own process of filling in what is sacred, and what you see here on the board? What do you notice? You know, I keep thinking of the practice of what do you see, what do you think, what do you wonder in this? And please go ahead and unmute your mic if you'd like to speak, but chat is also great.
Hi, I would like to share that for me, it's been amazing how students are being so adaptable and resilient. And I think for what's sacred and what comes next or post-pandemic, we need to learn from them, and we need to base our new curriculum or new school on their thoughts, their feelings, more from them.
Building it around students. That's amazing. Imagine that.
What a concept.
I would like to say that I think that now more than ever, this is where we have to think about the rapport that we are building with our students, especially with kids that we haven't met in person, right? Like we have met through the camera. And I think it's important how to build that rapport, that trust with them. So that is going to really engage into the way that they are learning. And that's the way that is going to teach us also how we can be like great teachers for them, because we just don't know, as it says a lot about empathy here. And that I noticed, like, we need to be empathetic with our students and to understand that even if we don't know how they are like at home, or we don't have the full story, we just have to understand that it's different from any other story, even for ours. And we just have to be empathetic with that and keep building that rapport with them.
Yeah, thank you. Lar.
Looking at the Padlet, I'm very amused and happy to see that I think that nobody wrote like content, curriculum, schedules, things like that. It's looking at all the concepts in general, it's based on our human essence. Is like we need to bond, we need to relate, as Cristina was saying, the rapport that we have among ourselves. So I think that that's what makes the difference. So education, it's not really, of course it's the content, but beyond that is the way we relate, and we learn how to relate with others And that kind of relationships and the empathy and caring is what can really make a difference in our society. Because if we're talking about having students being aware of being global citizens or social responsible persons, we cannot even think about that if we don't go to the basic, which is respect, tolerance, empathy, being patient, flexible, caring. I mean, all those elements that are like so obvious here in this Padlet, which I think that it's beautiful to look at.
Isn't
So,
it?
Laura, I'm going to jump in, Homa, if I can, just really fast. So, you know, we listen very carefully to language, and you said education, of course it is the content. Well, what if it's not? I don't want to necessarily talk about that, but I think it's a really interesting question. What if education really isn't about the content? What if education is about something else? Because if it was about the content, it would end up here, wouldn't it? I mean, it would be on this Padlet somewhere. So as we think about, you know, a new idea of what an education is, maybe it's not about the content. Maybe it's about something much different. Sorry, I just had to throw that in there.
Yeah, no, it's good. And Lar, you also anticipated we do this exercise a lot, and it will not surprise all of you to know that this is the outcome everywhere. This is the universal outcome, universal human need. And yes, and I'm going to call on you, Luisa. So one thing about this, you know, we usually say, what do you not see here? And so you definitely are anticipating that question. There is a lot that you're used to with schools that you don't see. So Luisa.
Yes, thank you. I was gonna add on to what was her name? Sorry, the person that just shared before.
Lar.
Okay, Lar. Yeah, I was just gonna add on. I was gonna say exactly the same thing. Nobody wrote grades. Nobody wrote anything related with school, right? However, it was. I want to just share a really quick story that with my students that I had after Christmas. And I have a 4th grade class, and I asked them, so what are you grateful for? What's meaningful for you right now? What do you care about right now? And all of my students, absolutely everyone, wrote the love that we have in our family, the relationships, that my parents are healthy, that my family is doing fine, even though we're having a hard time at home, like struggling. Every single one of them look like they are conscious about this is important things in life, not anything else. Like, this is what we need to look for. This is what we need to strive. This is what we need to keep. This is what we need to move. Like, the students already have that. So why don't we use that? They're already there. Some of them are teachers for us, many of them. So it's just, yeah, part of my story and my reflection.
Thank you. Thank you. Linda.
Okay, I was actually thinking that the purpose of an education is to prepare you for your society. So as we reimagine what our society, like what we want our children to grow up into, like the society that we envision for them, we have to prepare them for that. So a lot of what you guys had said, like relationships and like the importance of family, community, etc., all of that is like, it's a call to arms to us, I guess, in a way of saying, like, to prepare, like, what kind of people do we want to prepare? Obviously, content is negotiable. It can vary from school to school, person to person, but the idea is to actually have them ready for the kind of society that we want. I don't know. That's what I believe our challenge is for this new portal that we're creating.
Yes. Having them ready for the society we want, for the problems of the world have changed so much. So to know what problem do I want to solve? How do I go about solving that problem? It really requires this different set of skills, and that caring, that empathy, that psychological safety can help really unleash it. So maybe let's hear from Gabriela, and then we'll move on to the next section.
Just a little bit on what Linda said, it sort of reminded me of Maslow's hierarchies of needs. And I wonder if I wouldn't say that because when schools were founded, but I think, and I'm wondering if these last 100 years, has there been a different definition of what really that self-actualization of Maslow really is. And I just wonder if this pandemic has brought us down to acknowledge a little bit of those real needs, the second one and the third one, and going a little bit into the content. Once we really find that purpose with a question of what problems you want to solve or what you want to leave your legacy, then that might be that extrinsic motivation to then go and deep dive. And I wouldn't say content, but more like on that disciplinary knowledge, whether it's engineering, whether it's biology, whether it's literature, in order to create self-actualized human beings.
So I'm going to just add, I'm going to veer off our script just a little because I want to build on what you just.
I knew you were.
I know, because I got really excited that you mentioned Maslow's hierarchy.
Go for it.
He knows I'm really into this. So, okay, so Viktor, that's interesting about Viktor Frankl with Maslow's hierarchy. So there's some really interesting research that has come out in the last, not that long ago, few years, that has found that when Maslow was creating the hierarchy of needs, at the top of the triangle, the top of the pyramid was self-actualization. That was the peak, right? And the research that has been found is that Maslow did his research as an anthropologist in Alberta, Canada, on the Blackfoot Indian Reserve, learning from the Indigenous people of Canada, of Alberta, Canada. And what he learned from, the teepee, the house, okay? And the teepee, when you think of a teepee, you think of that triangle, but it's very symbolic. It means, and I think we have this in the book too. There's the triangle, and then each section of the teepee is symbolic, and he was inspired by the symbolism of that pyramid, of that teepee, to make the hierarchy. But we only got a portion of the story when we learned Maslow's hierarchy, because what he took from, he extracted the indigenous knowledge. In the indigenous picture of the teepee, self-actualization is the base. That is the beginning. So it's very important. It takes all of these things to get to self-actualization. The problem is, I think we interpreted that was the end of the story. Me, myself, I, individual, not looking out for the context of what's around me. So the rest of the TP story, after self-actualization, comes community, culture, and even spiritual growth. And so at the top of the teepee, if you see a picture of a teepee, you'll see that the sticks, they stick out. It isn't because they didn't cut it off, it's deliberate. It is reaching to the heavens. So our that is a missing piece. I feel like it's a missing piece of the puzzle for us and our students. It fits very well with our human need for what is sacred, to go back to think about love, community, relationship, and that then going back to this indigenous wisdom. And I feel like my Latin American friends will definitely relate to this. We have so much to return and learn from that wisdom. So it is very powerful when we think about what our students need. It is not just individual achievement. It is not only self-actualization. It is in context of community, purpose, that early question about purpose, meaning, culture, and something greater than ourselves, that reaching up to the heavens. So anyway, I just think that's really powerful. It very much links to well-being. Our understanding of well-being is not that we are islands on our own and our self-actualization is met by itself. And during pandemic, when this virus is spreading so rapidly and, we are all impacted by the behavior of someone far away that we've never met before, we see this sort of essential coming together, I think, more and more. So I just think that's a really powerful wisdom that we can learn about. And it isn't just Albert Maslow by himself who made up this theory. He was inspired by the Blackfoot people. And we can, and I've also seen a little bit of a tangent here. Thank you for the hearts. Somebody talked about if you want to think about what is progressive education or anything that is progressive, study indigenous culture, study indigenous people. When we learn from the harmony with the land, the harmony with each other, it is very powerful, and it really does fit with, so it links our past, our present, our future. So I think that's a good segue to our next part, to reinvent, right? Let's go there.
That's an awesome digression. I love listening to you tell that story every time you tell it.
Every time.
every single time. No, I'm serious. I love that. I think that it's just, I love when we look at things new and see things differently. And that's definitely a story that changes a lot of what has been, that we carry around in our heads about how we operate in the world. So
yeah,
appreciate you telling that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to put you to work. This last piece, we're going to put you into breakout rooms for a good chunk of time, and we're going to get you to reinvent. We're going to get you to start thinking about, okay, so if you've reflected on where you are and where your institution is, and if you've kind of checked in and asked yourself, okay, so what do we want to keep and what do we want to maybe work on and continue or let go in terms of things that may not be working, then we need to get aspirational, and we need to ask ourselves, who do we want to become, right? Who do we want to be? And again, I'll just refresh that quote from the keynote, that your present circumstances, that's what's happening right now, doesn't determine the outcome. All it says is we're just starting here. We're starting in this very crazed, disruptive, frustrating, exhausting moment. But that doesn't mean that we can't do great things. It doesn't mean that we can't build and design and create and do good work in the world with kids in schools. So just really briefly, we're down at the bottom of our framework, and we're really thinking now about redefining our own roles as individuals, and also then reinventing what schools look like, reinventing our systems and our structures. And that it's a lot about creation, but it's asking this very aspirational question: what might we become? Who might we become in this moment? So, when Homa and I sat down to write this book, that really was where our brain space was at that moment. How can we help schools, individuals, districts, boards, provinces think about moving forward from this moment, and what are the fundamental questions that we need to ask? And so we came up with these 9, and there are some that a couple of people have said, well, why didn't you include that one? And there are others that are really important. One of them is, what's worth teaching? I think that's a great question. What's the content that we should be teaching? But that really doesn't get to the foundational piece, right? Because you can't really answer that question unless you go here first. So we're trying to get really down to the base. And so what we're going to do is we're going to break you out, and we're going to put you in 9 rooms. And basically, we're going to send you, give you a link to a Google Slides document that has 9 slides on it. Each slide is different. So if you get put in breakout room 1, then you go to slide 1. If you go to breakout room 2, you go to slide 2, 3, 4, 4, you'll figure it out, right? And what we want you to do is, there are a couple of prompts on each slide that are ways of thinking about, okay, so how do we reinvent? How do we start this process of thinking differently for what our school experience might be in the future? And we're going to give you about 12 minutes, 15 minutes or so to just sit with those two prompts and to talk about, what might you do here? What are some ideas? Just brainstorm, just, make this very iterative. And you can answer, and if hopefully, in fact, please answer the questions within the box underneath the prompts, so that then all of you at some point can go back to each of those 9 questions and see what other people wrote. and get a sense of how we can kind of, how we're thinking about all of these questions at the same time. But you're only going to work on the one that you're sent to in the breakout. So hopefully that makes sense. So here basically is the address, and I'll put this in the chat as well, so that you can you can click on it and you can go there now if you like. That's fine. Just remember, whatever breakout room you get in, that's the slide you go to, and that's the one that you work on for the next 12, maybe longer. We'll see how it goes. All right. So hopefully that made sense. And I'm going to stop my share and basically send you into breakouts. Go ahead, Homa.
I also just want to add, so we have the 2 questions on each slide for each question are going to, they come from the book, from the audit portion of the book. We wanted you to try those. If you see the question and something else comes up for you, go ahead and have that conversation. It's okay. Like, we just want you to start thinking about that. If you have time for only one of the questions, that's okay too. Like, any of that. We just want you to get started thinking about it. And your rooms are going to be very small because not everyone who's signed up for the session is here. So your room will be small. Hopefully that's going to be okay.
Yep. You're going to be with either 3 or 4 people. So here we go. Have fun. We'll come back probably around 20 after the hour or so, maybe a little before that. Juice is flowing for your own conversations around these questions, but just wanted to give you some time to get started, at least in terms of thinking about, so, okay, how do we begin to look forward using these particular questions as a starting point? We do want to just open it up though, and hear what your reactions are, your reflections, maybe what was difficult about it, other questions that come to mind when looking at these, or anything else. We have about 15 minutes or so before the end of the session, and I think it's going to be pretty open-ended from this point. We have one more little piece to share with you, but we want to hear from you as much as possible in these last 15 minutes. So what do you think?
Well, I think our group was talking about the number 4, and when we started talking about what we have control over and what we don't have control over, we started looking at the list that we said theoretically we don't have control over. And I think that it ends up quickly becoming a list that you can then, it's the excuse, it's, oh, I can't do anything about it because.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder that our goal is to say, let's take everything off of that. Because I think actually, we do have some control over pretty much, some of those things that we typically say that we don't. But it's a matter of how do we then, work around that challenge, whether it's policies or regulations and government this and board that. And, well, we can't do something about it.
Right. And Michael, I think the reality is too, and I know some people do feel powerless. I've had people tell me that they are simply powerless to do anything about their circumstances. And if that's the case, then you've wasted a couple hours this afternoon, right? Because basically, there's no point in thinking about these questions or in thinking about a way forward. I don't think we're powerless at all. I think we can make change. I think it's complex. It's hard. It takes time. But already there are great stories that you can tell in all of your schools. And the more that I think we tell the stories of great learning that are happening, the more change will happen, Who else wants to jump in?
So I'll jump in. We were, we were the group for slide 5, I think. And you'll see that we did not write very much. We had a very rich conversation. And then at the very end, when the warning came up, we were like, somebody put some, Alejandro was really trying to get some stuff into the box.
Well, you have to, Katie, I just want you to know you're going to get a bad grade on this assignment because.
I told you, Ale.
Nothing.
I'm happy to hear that though, because I was a little worried. I was like, oh no.
No. So we
didn't want to talk about that.
No, I think we had a really great conversation about it. Ale and I are at the same school and Denali is at a different school, but, we were talking a lot about, particularly in the situation of inclusion, I don't want to call out my school, but we have an inclusion week coming up this week. It's called Inclusion Week. But the feeling that I get from it is that it's primarily about students with learning differences and maybe some physical differences. And so, you know, it's one of those things about thinking about being proactive about these important conversations, and that, you know, Denali gave an example of a student who's transgender, and how that child really coming out caused the conversation to start. And, you know, what I really feel like is it shouldn't be a reactive thing. It shouldn't be that now we'd have to hold this student up as the reason we have to have these conversations, and for some people that turns into, you're the problem, you're the reason we have to change and the reason we have to do things differently. And so really thinking about how we can be proactive about making sure those conversations are happening early on, and making ourselves known as a community that's open and actually open and having these conversations, even if it's really hard, particularly in conservative religious countries. But I think it's not okay to then leave it to a child to have to be courageous to say, I'm different and I need to be treated differently for this reason. I need this, this to feel safe and to be happy. But then it turns into a thing, it becomes a problem, unfortunately. Whereas if we could be more proactive about it, then it wouldn't need to be. So that was the nutshell of the conversation that we had.
Thank you so much. And Jessica.
Yeah, following Katie's line of thought, I was telling my coworkers, I don't know, my teammates. I was talking with my teammates, and I was telling them that I think we need as teachers to be prepared for these kind of situations. I don't know about your schools, but in mine, every single time a student comes out or they come and tell me, teacher, I'm sad, I'm depressed, I want to die. The answer from administrators is always, take them to the psychologist, to the therapist. You're not supposed to say absolutely anything to the student. You are not ready. Well, in that case, I don't think I should become a psychologist to be ready, but I think administrators need to invest on preparation of this kind. They are always preparing us for pedagogy or grading, etc., but never for this kind of stuff. We need to. We were working on slide 7. You will notice some of this conversation in there, and that's it.
Thanks for that. It's interesting too, that question, who is unheard? It also then begs the question, what do we want to hear from those who are unheard? What can we deal with almost? How prepared are we to listen to those voices? And that's an important part of the conversation as well. So thanks for bringing that up. Appreciate it. Who else wants to jump in?
I'm curious also, what was hard about this? What was hard about this conversation?
I think, I'm sorry. Maria?
Go
ahead.
Go.
No, go.
Okay, I think Miss Patty is gonna agree with me, finding the words to we would give a lot of examples, and my group was number 2. We were talking about the learning, and we were just like, okay, we have this example, but how do we put it in words? That was really hard for us. So that was hard.
And isn't it interesting that is one of the hardest words to define, even though it is at the center of our work, right? I mean, if we don't have some coherent understanding in our schools as to what we mean when we say that word, it becomes kind of interesting for kids to try to figure it out. I know, I tell the story all the time, but my kids, there was no coherence around that. Every teacher had a different definition, pretty much. And so they'd go to block 1, they'd have to figure out what that teacher wanted. And then they go to block 2 and figure that one out. And then they go to block 3 to be a totally different, and yet, and this doesn't just hold true for learning. There's a lack of common language in schools that's really detrimental to the work that we do. Go and ask 10 people how they define success. That's a really interesting one. you know, you'll get all sorts of different answers on that. Yet, what does that do to kids if there are 10 different variations on that word from 10 different people? So struggling with the language is really, really hard, but it's crucial if we're going to have some, you know, some semblance of moving forward with, you know, our favorite word, coherence.
Marianne.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. I was in group 9, and we had a lot of issues thinking what's next, because at the moment the future is so uncertain that, okay, maybe we are prepared for the change, but is that change going to be what our students need? What do we, you know, what do we keep? What can we change? What do we reinvent? We were talking about differentiation, like every student learns in a different way. So we need to prepare ourselves to teach in different ways. But how can we do that? I think that's a really tough question to answer.
You know, that one is really tough. I mean, all of these require some background knowledge. Like if you come from out of the blue and you look at this, like the way we've set you up is just you're a blank canvas and let's see how you think about this. I don't think we are often sort of put in a position to think like a futurist. And so that's actually something that Will and I teach is futures thinking, because it is sort of it's an amazing framework. It's an amazing skill set. So we sort of threw you in the water without giving you those tools, but you're capable of starting to figure it out. It reminds me a little bit of the, you know, the school in the cloud, Sugata Mitra experiment that he did with kids in a slum in India. He put a computer in a window, and after a while, the kids with enough exposure, they figured out how to program it. They didn't have to be taught. They had that capacity. So in a way, we're throwing you into the water or into the, you know, computer to figure out the code. But you're doing it. Like in a few minutes, it shows what you're capable of doing. So like you did a beautiful job. You know, there's a lot to learn from this. So it's kind of an interesting like experiment that we threw you in. Yeah. And somebody had their hand up. Will, did you see that?
Yeah, Katie, go ahead.
That's me. So I was going to say, we were talking about connecting, and I guess along with connecting, the challenge is the complexity of the entire thing. Because if you think about connecting, you can think about connecting relationship-wise, connecting among teachers, connecting teacher with student, connecting to the learning, technologically connecting, you know, are people actually able to use the Wi-Fi? And so there are so many different layers and so many different factors that go into it. It was interesting in the group how some people were looking at the connection between teachers and the families. And now families know what's going on in the school and how their student's learning and what their student is doing. And then I looked at the connections that I've been able to make through workshops like this one and webinars, and how much more access I have had to learning from schools all over Latin America. And then the third example I had was some of my students have been able to connect through an online course that wasn't offered previous to the pandemic, but I hope is offered after this is over, where they've been able to connect with students from all over Latin America in a course that isn't targeting a specific content, but rather is targeting learning in a new and different way. And that's the Innovation Academy from FDR in Lima, Peru.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's great. Thank you for that. Yeah, this was a way to get to and many of you talked about global education and global citizenship as a priority for your school, and even thinking more broadly about that. And I love how you've naturally gravitated to being both really global, really like tearing walls down in terms of courses and curriculum and learning opportunities even for yourself, and you went really local, thinking about how you're connected to the people in your community. And that's a wonderful way, I think, to get to like really truly connection kind of questions. Yeah, thanks for that.
Larissa, I know you had your hand up, but you took it down. I don't know. I just wanted to give you a chance to jump in if you wanted to or not.
Sure, I will. Our team, we were talking, I think all the questions have something to like to do very deep thinking, right? And ours, it was not the exception, I think, because it was like things that are not sacred in our schools, the negotiable ones. What if we stop doing those? And I was surprised that it was very, very hard for us to figure it out. And at the end, I think that in conclusion, what we said is that it's very, very hard to break down systems and changing things in a culture. I'm not talking about like culture like the society, but the inner culture of a school. It's very, very hard, and trying to get people thinking on a different way of trying or getting people on trying different things. It's so, so hard. And you will always have a lot of like resistance, right? So it was very interesting that we couldn't really write something on our paper, on our slide, because it really took us a lot of time to think. Like, okay, we have a problem that might be the system, but without the system, what are we going to do? That was like so hard to set down, right? So I'm still thinking on that, on the on the negotiables in our schools, but really how much we are willing or even there to change those. I don't know if I make sense.
Yeah,
I'm still like thinking.
You made a lot of sense. And again, I think that resonates with the way a lot of people feel. And so, you know, with the understanding that the change process, again, takes a while, and it's slow, and it's about building people's capacity to understand why change needs to happen, and then engaging in profound conversations around what the change needs to be. It's hard work. And so, you know, as we kind of bring this to a close, we want to just finish this up with one small point and then let you go. But, you know, it's change is happening, and it's going to continue to happen. And, you know, there's a quote, I forget who said it, but, you know, if you don't like the way the current reality is, then you have a choice as to what you do in the future. I mean, we do, as much as we are being buffeted by these events, you know, and things are happening to us, we still have control in many ways over what we choose to do in response. And even if it's small things. But I think Homa would agree too, the most important thing is that we need to change the stories in people's heads as to what school is. We need to change the narratives and the expectations about what people think should be happening in schools. And those stories are coming out more and more. We read stories all the time about kids who are doing amazing work in the world, you know, solving real problems, collaborating and creating things, and in school with teachers, and that they are in many ways embraced more readily by higher ed and universities and colleges because of that innovative and creative thinking and doing that they're doing. So we need to tell those stories. We need to amplify. Any chance you get to amplify change is one that you have to take, and just make sure that people are seeing it and talking about it, you know, every way that you can. One way that you can do that is to, you know, really think about community. And so we want to end on this note. You know, community is at the center of our framework. Homa talked about it earlier, but at the end of the day, this has to happen in community. It has to happen not just individuals, not just institutions, but with parents, with kids, with all voices, you know, being a part of the conversation, hopefully around existential, interesting questions like the ones that we've offered up here. We want to invite you to continue to have this conversation. 2 hours, it's frustrating that we're always time limited. There's so much to process and there's so much to think about. So we want to invite you. I know I posed this invitation at the beginning, during the keynote, but we want to continue this conversation with you. And if you'll join us here at bqi.community, we just started this about 3 weeks ago. We have about 350 people in there, I think, at this point. I'm going to be really honest with you. We're not 100% sure what we're doing in there, but we know that we want to make it a place where change can happen, where people can come together, where they can engage in these difficult questions and to make things, to do things in the world. That's what's coming in this space. So we'd love to continue this conversation with you in there. We'd love to hear how things are going. And we'd like to build a movement around the questions that we're asking and the questions that you're asking as well. So please feel free to join us there if you haven't checked it out already. I'll just finish by saying thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Homa and I are very much interested in the ways that these conversations land on people's shoulders and in their communities and in their schools. So please feel free to get in touch with us if there's any feedback or comments that you have. I'll wish you great success with your work moving forward, and I'll leave Homa to give the last word for the session today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Will. I thought it was really interesting in the chat that there seemed to be this convergence around parents and board members also need to be in this conversation, as we were naturally taking you through the framework to talk about community. So it was sort of this really interesting, like natural, of course, you can't do this alone. And I know that there has been voiced privately and as a group, like, this is hard. And if I'm the only one at my school, or there's just a few of us at our school who are doing this, it's going to be hard to not go back to the old normal. So we do want to support your schools, and you can support each other also to build up this knowledge and ways to talk about how to not go back to normal and really kind of act as that collective community that can support each other through this. So excuse me, it really has been such a pleasure to have all of you so engaged. And we've really enjoyed and really, really appreciate, and especially Michael Adams, thank you so much for creating this wonderful, wonderful space, and all of you for being such active participants. So,
hey, Will and Homa, thank you very much. Since you mentioned me there, I'll chime in just to thank you in the name of the entire group, but also, as I mentioned in the chat, to everyone here, Will and Homa have agreed to join us. We haven't quite figured it out exactly how, but they will be joining us for the virtual Tri-Conference in October. So please be sure, I think almost everybody here is part of our Tri-region. And so be sure to talk to your schools, and we've sent out some preliminary stuff already, but we'll be following up with that. So this wonderful conversation will continue. So thank you, Will, and thank you, Homa.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Stay well, stay safe, and let's change the world.